It's not Monday, but I'm still joined by my good friend, the fantasy doc, Raj Brar. It's been a while, my friend. How are you?
Not too bad. Yourself?
I am very good. I am very good. How are we enjoying the international break?
Trying to get away from some of the Arsenal stress, for the ramp up for the end of the season, but trying my best. As you know, injuries never rest or sleeps. Therefore, we cannot rest or sleep.
This is very, very true. I mean, I'm glad you touched upon Arsenal because I've just done a video which we're yet to upload, but we talked about Arsenal quite in depth about this season running. And we've had a couple of schools of thought. We've looked at underlying data for those teams in and around that sort of seventh, eighth, and ninth position. And what that indicates that those teams are at greater risk of reducing their points per game ratio during these final eight matches, which could potentially, mean that if fantasy managers were looking at Arsenal assets for this run-in, then you could be on a little bit of a downward trajectory. And that fits in maybe quite nicely or in with the philosophy that Mikel Arteta may, prioritize the Europa League, thinking that he's outside of those European spots in the Premier and wants to go all gun blazing in that competition. I mean, how would you feel about that, and about, where do you think Arteta's focus should lie, being an Arsenal supporter?
And I think it's certainly going to be in Europa League. That is the most clear-cut path to playing in Europe next year. Whereas in the league, in the Premier League, they need help, and so I think you always have to focus on that path that you can control best. And so they got a pretty good draw for the Europa League. So I completely agree with you in that will likely be the priority, possibly to the chagrin of rotation within the Premier League.
So definitely err on the side of caution when it comes to Arsenal assets going forward. Anyway, cut to the chase. Obviously, we're here to talk about injuries. It's been a while. I know you've been very active and produced a lot of content. And I want to touch upon a guy that you did provide an update on. And maybe his availability, it's even more imperative for Manchester United with concerns over Mason Greenwood, who was released from the under-21s, and was still question marks over the fitness of Edison Cavani. And that is Marcus Rashford. I just wondered if you're able to provide a little bit of update on his specific injury and whether you feel that he could maybe recover in time to play this weekend.
Yeah, this is a tricky one because the team hasn't really released much information. All we know is that he went with the England international team. He didn't train or anything. I think he went for just more moral support and then ended up leaving. From what the team has said, it sounds like he has a foot contusion. They said blood around the bone, which may or may not be a bone bruise. If that's the case, those can be pretty variable in their timeline. So however, if you do see him returning to training, then it's a good sign that he's able to bear weight without pain, because it becomes more of a pain tolerance issue than a healing issue.
Yeah, so we'll keep our eyes and ears open, and I think we'll probably expect maybe Ollie speaking at some point on Friday ahead of their game, and we'll have a better understanding of where we see Rashford. Me personally, I take the fact that Rashford not only went away with England, but he did remain with the group for a few days. I take that as a bit of a positive sign, because if it was maybe on the higher end of that in terms of severity, he would have been straight back to United and getting treatment on it, and hoping to recover as soon as possible. So I'm taking a positive from that. And of course, for those who know, Rashford is my set and forget on the official fantasy game for my sins. Closer to home, Raj, and I'm gonna have to pull. We've had some good and some bad injury updates in recent times across my local boys, Newcastle. Thankfully, it looks as if Callum Wilson will be well placed to return in game week 30. The club arranged a bounce game for him during the week there. Obviously, he's recovering from a hamstring problem. If he comes through that unscathed, then I fully expect him to be in the squad. And there's an outside chance that maybe Alan San-Maxim could also be there. However, every every silver lining, and the cloud comes in the absence of Isaac Hayden. What do we know about that injury that Isaac suffered down at the Amex Stadium that's unfortunately ended his campaign?
Yeah, so let's start with the good news. The good news is that the team said that he does not require surgery. So that indicates that he may either have, like, for example, a grade 2, because the original fear was a severe ACL rupture or something of that nature. He may have a lower end ACL issue or possibly an MCL full rupture, which can heal without surgery. In either case, that return timeline is about 3-ish months, which is far less than, let's say, if he needed, a reconstruction surgery. So although he's out for the season, some good news there.
Hopefully he returns with Newcastle to Premier League football. That's no gimme at this point in time with us and Fulham seems to be vying for that final relegation spot. And finally, I want to move across to Villa. Jack Grealish, the talisman of Aston Villa. He's been, his absence from that Villa side has been notable in recent weeks. A downturn in outputs, performances, results. Worrying for Villa fans. We talk about this. If there was ever a one-man team, then Jack Grealish and Aston Villa are probably it. We know he hasn't featured in the last, maybe I think it's 4 or 5 games. He was omitted from the England squad. We've talked about this shin issue previously, about pain management. In terms of where we are in a possible return in game week 30, what would be your understanding with that, Raj?
I think based on the time he's had off, based on the fact that he's now back to training, I'm pretty confident in the fact that he will return. And so I think we had talked about it when it first happened. We had considered maybe shin splints, maybe a bone stress injury. They haven't released any information on it beyond shin discomfort. It sounds like the latter, is based on the time course, but the fact that he's now back to full training multiple days does bode very well for him. And like you said, if there ever was a team where one player is the key to the whole engine, it's Grealish.
Yeah. And should supporters be concerned that Jack being thrown back in there? Because we would expect, Dean Smith, given the results, he's probably going to put Jack straight back into that starting 11. Games are going to be coming thick and fast again. Should supporters be worried that he's potentially being risked, and pushed in, as a re-injury problems or recurrence issues that might, stem from being thrown straight back in there?
I'd be a lot more concerned if they had brought him back before the break, because they were in a poor spell and they still kept him out past the international break. So I think that already shows a level of being conservative where they won't rush him back. And so I think that bodes well for him. There's, of course, when you come back from a long spell out, there's always inherent risk for re-injury, whether it's muscular or that issue. But beyond that normal risk, I think them holding him out and being conservative bodes well for his ability to play out the rest of these matches.
Mm-hmm. With that, I'm thinking just a little bit of the wider circle and maybe moving away from Villa and thinking about England. In the Euro 2021 championships, we obviously know that it's going to be, a world stage tournament. Again, high pressure environment where the games are coming thick and fast. Will Jack Grealish be okay to tolerate the demands of that high level sport with those games, at such intensity?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that will depend on how he holds up towards the back end of this season. And honestly, I think that's a concern for any of these players who have been playing, in a lot of games since the restart. I think they just implemented, for FIFA did for the Euro Cup, the 5 sub rule. And you're going to have a lot of players who are gassed. And I think managers are going to have to really use that substitution effectively. And that applies to Grealish as well. They're going to have to really be careful with his day-to-day assessment, because those shin issues, as we've seen with him, once they pop up, they can knock you out for a bit of time, especially for a footballer. You're constantly on your feet. You're constantly hitting the ground with force. and he takes a lot of contact from other players as well.
Yeah, cool, excellent. And staying with Aston Villa, and one final update. Great news what we've seen from Bodymoor Heath was Wesley. And we've seen him back on the training pitches in recent weeks, but he took part in a behind closed doors game, a 45-minute run out. Obviously, great for him to come through that. But given the fact that he's been out since New Year's Day in 2020, so we're talking maybe 15, 16 months now, can Villa supporters read a lot into that sort of 45-minute bounce game in terms of a Premier League return?
I think they'll be very, very careful with him in terms of that ramp up period, whether it goes from that 45 into a U23, and then again assessing along the way. Now, is there a chance? Certainly. Again, something to keep an eye on, just how he's progressing. If he keeps being played into the more aggressive games and has that ramp up, then certainly.
And given the type of injury that he's had, can we expect a return to performance over time? Can we expect Wesley to maybe start hitting those level of outputs that he was pre-injury? Because he did endure a little bit of a ropey start to his career in England, but as he was settled and he got more used to the environment and the rigors of the game, we started to see a better Wesley, and that injury came at an unfortunate time and moment for him. Do you think you'd be to sort of recapture that, given what you know about that specific type of injury?
Typically, the benchmark for these major injuries, I look around 2 years post-injury. And so I think it would be a good process if he's able to come back this year just to build up some fitness. Then he has the summer to really build on that and then return with Villa next season. I would really look at the turn of this next year to see him get back to that return to performance. I mean, being out for 15 months from this level of intensity, that's no joke. It takes a lot of time, not just physically, but also the mental aspect to regain that confidence.
Yeah, listen, Raj, fantastic. The fans at Easter Doc, we always love to have you on the show. Great updates. If you haven't seen Raj's videos on YouTube, why not? 3CB Performance. He covers everything, not only football, from basketball. You do the lot, Raj. You're like the magician. Raj, fantastic, my friend. You take care, stay safe, and we'll speak very soon.
You too.